To Chairman Ramon Del Rosario of the MBC and the members of the Makati Business Club leadership who are here, Vice Chairman Jaime Sobel, Doris Ho, Gigi Montinola, Gili Luchanco. Likewise to the leadership of the MAP, President Perry Pe. Mabuti ka pa, Perry, presidente ka na, no? Huh? How does that sound? Does it sound good? President Perry Pe. Okay. Vice President Marife Zamora. Immediate past President Popoy Del Rosario. Noel Bonoan, one of the directors. And of course, what was jointly referred to by both organizations as a valued member of their leadership, Cora de la Paz, both of MBC and MAP. I see so many friends and even family members all the way back there in the audience. Thank you very much for the time. Fellow workers in government, and just want to say in particular, someone who I've worked with for so long in the executive, both in the DTI days and recently in the Aquino administration. Secretary Greg Domingo is here with us. Japanese Ambassador Ishikawa-san, we're honored that you are here. To the executive directors of both the MBC and the MAP, Peter Perfecto of the MBC and Arnold Salvador of the MAP. To all the other members and of the leadership of the Makati Business Club and the MAP. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat. And thank you all very much for being here this afternoon. I'm very, very pleased and encouraged. I thought that I would be the last speaker in this series because it was, as Ramon had said, it would be alphabetical. And so the thought that crossed my mind was, the ballroom is full, all the tables are full, they have heard already all the previous speakers, so they have not yet been convinced. So I'm glad that you are here waiting to be convinced. I thought long and hard about my remarks here this afternoon. In a manner of speaking, this is a homecoming for me. I have worked with many of you. I have labored and toiled DTI days, DOTC days, as a senator, as a congressman before that, and more recently as a member of the DILG. And there is a saying, one of the hardest audiences to go back to are the people that you know so very well. No? So it's with a great deal of trepidation that I approach this afternoon's session. But what came to mind is the reality that I am here, although you've known me for a long time, but I am here really as a job applicant. And it's in that context that I approach today's session. Your decision is not very different from a decision that an investor will make regarding the Philippines. In a manner of speaking, this is an investor's forum. You know all about the country, you operate in the country, you make money, you go through your jobs and your professions and your businesses operating in the country. And now you are interviewing who would be the next CEO. In a manner of speaking, you're the board of directors for your company or for our country. No? And so you all have skin in the game. You're all invested here. Your fortunes, your investments, your companies, your stakeholders are all dependent on your decisions and on your choices. And to use a venture capital phrase, the country right now has gone from diaper to short pants. And the question before us as a nation is, how do we get from short pants to long pants? Right? And who's the best person that can take us through that transition? The problems of getting from diaper to short pants are very, very different from the problems that will get us to long pants. We want to get into the big boys game. We have gotten many, many accolades from across the globe. If you take a look at the context in which we operate, we were once called the sick man of Asia, as if we were lepers or unable to keep pace with our newly industrialized country neighbors. We were called the gang that couldn't shoot straight. We were called the people that never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Keystone Cops. More elegantly, The Economist called the country event-rich. Coups, volcano explosions, earthquakes, tsunamis, storms, and so on, and political turmoil, and so on and so forth. But here we are 6 years later, and what was once the sick man of Asia is now referred to as Asia's bright star. It is not simply a headline. It is backed up by various assessments of international agencies. And even we ourselves, when we look upon our book of accounts, so to speak, we can say that we have progressed quite far. To continue the analogy of the sick man of Asia, we are now no longer in the emergency room, no longer in ICU. We have now been discharged from the hospital, well on our way to getting better and learning now how to go from walking to running, to jogging, to running. And if you take a look at all of the other assessments, the vital signs of the patient appear good. Our unemployment rate is at 5.8%, the lowest in 10 years. Average GDP over the last 6 years is about 6.6%, 6.2%. World Economic Forum, Global Competitiveness Index, we have improved 40 slots from 87 to 47. Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index, 134 to 95, and so on and so forth. I mean, you're very, very familiar with all of this information. And by the way, I'll make my remarks, or at least the outline of my remarks, available on our website, so you can go and look at all of this data that I'm referring to. No? But more importantly, out-of-school youths went down from 2.9 million to 1.2 million in the current year, 2015, I mean. Self-rated hunger went from 23.4%, nearly 1/4 of our population, to 11%, 1/10, roughly 1/10 of our population. The question is, how did we do this? This did not happen by miracle. This did not happen in a wink of an eye. This took all of us. All of us collectively put a good, clean, decent government in place in 2010. And that government, holding true to the precepts of good governance of Daang Matuwid, was able to enable you, the private sector, to attain all of these accomplishments. Continuing with the analogy of the patient, how did we do this? Well, there were some blockages, so to speak, in the artery of our country, in the arteries of our country. And what we did was to unblock these blockages so that we could unleash the vibrancy and the dynamism of you, the private sector, so that you, the private sector, could, in fact, lead the growth and development of our country. What were some of these blockages? First was corruption. There was a very, very strong anti-corruption plank that was put in place. The former ombudsperson, who was not very anti-corruption, was induced to resign. The former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who lied on his SAL accounts, was forced to resign. Senators have been put under the bar of the judicial system and are now, in fact, awaiting their trials. Congressmen, governors, and so on and so forth. No? And I just want at this point to debunk that this has been selective. Because if you take a look at the records of the Ombudsman as well as the Sandigan Bayan, there is no predisposition for non-Liberal Party members. In fact, there are many Liberal Party members who have been subjected to this anti-corruption stance by the present government. So there is no room for corruption anywhere in a country that seeks to develop and wants to modernize. And that is something that has really been a good plank in a fundamental plank in our platform. How did we do this? Well, one of the other blockages was limited resources. What we did was we created fiscal space. We grew the economy. You grew the economy. We enabled the growing of the economy simply because there was clean leadership at the top. No? We improved tax collection efforts. I know that there's mixed reviews here about the current BIR commissioner, but here are the facts. No? From 12.2% tax collection effort, we improved it to last year to 13.7%. It might not seem like a lot, but 1.2% of GDP, which is about 14 trillion pesos, I did quick math, translates to about 210 billion additional resources that we are now able to deploy for social services, for infrastructure, and other needs of our country. So that 1.2% differential in clean, good tax collecting effort led to 260 billion annually that has now been deployed to better use. We had very, very good debt management so that what was interest expense at roughly 25% of our budget has now been reduced to about 13% of our budget. Again, those 12 percentage points applied to a 3 trillion peso budget translates to about 360 billion pesos. What was once paid to the international and domestic banks as interest payments because of good governance, because of good management of the economy, has lowered our cost of interest and now, and now has enabled us to raise these resources to be able to redeploy them to better goods. There were wrong priorities. This was another blockage. No? Government was pursuing the wrong priorities, and so what did we do? We invested in our single biggest resource, which was our people. Our people are the ones who create the vibrancy in our economy, and they're the ones, in fact, who are able to create the value added to spur our economy forward. So we invested in our people. How did we do that? On education, we closed the classroom gap, the teacher gap, the textbook gap, the desks and chairs gaps. Just to give you, just to catalog some of these things, by the end of this year, we would have created 184,000 classrooms all across the country. That's real. Each one of those things is geotagged. Each one of those things is now, each one of those classrooms are now being, or will be used, great majority of them are now being used by our kids to learn their lessons in school. We would have hired 274,000 teachers. At the start of this year, we already hired 214,000 teachers. Imagine any of your companies hiring this many people in 5 years. It really transforms the nature of your organization to be able to hire this number of people in order to provide the lessons that our kids need so that they can become productive members of our economy. We invested in physical infrastructure as well and in our resiliency. I remember in 2009, 2010, the entire capital expenditure outlay of the government was roughly 170 billion pesos. Last year, 2015, it was 580 billion pesos, times 3. This year, 2016, it's 800 billion pesos, times 5. And all of that without raising our debt as a percent of our economy, without raising interest rate as a percent of our total budget. So closing the leakages, creating the fiscal space, managing the government and the economy well, created all of this fiscal space so that we could now redeploy these resources to where they have the utmost value added for our country. And that's to our people as well as in physical infrastructure. These are all examples that have been talked about over the last 5 years. And the reason I bring them up is because unlike all other candidates, I'm the only candidate that is saying or that is standing on the platform of continuity. Ituloy. Typically, when it's election time, palitan, tanggalin, patalsikin. Right? I don't know the English translations of those, so it makes it difficult. So, remove and for our foreign guests, kick them out and so on and so forth, right? But we in Daang Matuwid are running on the platform of continuity of Ituloy. And so it's important that you and I understand where we came from, how we got to where we are, because this is what we believe in. This is what we've worked for collectively over the last 5 years, and this is what we hope. These are the principles that we hope to continue. But that's not all. The question in your minds now is, okay, Mar, you told us, diapers to short pants, how do we now get to long pants? And here's how we do that. We will do that by continuing to grow the economy. We will continue to grow the economy based on 3 pillars. First will be manufacturing. Manufacturing is roughly 25%, 30% of our GDP. I believe that we need to be able to grow this, and we can grow this. Excuse me. Let there be light. There was light here. That threw me off for a bit there. So manufacturing, we will be able to do this by attracting quality jobs that are now looking for a better site than where they are presently. Just the other day, I was in a factory in Porac, Pampanga. 10,000 workers, companies called Super L. They just recently came here. They saw the example of one of the companies that I'm very familiar with, because I and Greg, when he was with us in the BOI, was able to invite them, Lu and Tai. They've got about 60,000 workers here. So this company, who was a competitor of theirs in China, saw the move of Lu and Tai. They investigated it, and they came over about 4 years ago. Now, 10,000 workers. The monthly amount, the monthly cash that goes into the local Porac community is about 150 million pesos. So it's not what I'm saying. The point I'm trying to make is that we've been able to do this before, and we can do this again. Companies will find a hospitable climate here. They're very happy that they're here, and in fact are inviting their suppliers to come and join us here. 1 million jobs might sound impossible. Not that difficult. 100 such companies, 100 at 10,000 is 1 million jobs. And I find that can be very easily attained so long as we stay the course, we continue the course. So manufacturing, tourism. The latest statistic on tourism is about 5.2, 5.4 million tourists having entered the country. We believe that we can double this to 12 million tourists in the next 6 years. The plan that Secretary Mon Jimenez has put together requires about 65 billion pesos in capital expenditures by the private sector for hotels, restaurants, and so on and so forth, only requiring that the government continue its infrastructure spending so that the roads, ports, airports, and other necessary infrastructure to move the people across the archipelago are likewise in place. And lastly, in agriculture. Agriculture is the big elephant in the room. We all know and we all benefit from the products of agriculture, and yet agriculture is really one of the areas with the greatest poverty all across our country. And it's not easy, it's not hard to see why. Agriculture represents roughly 1/8, about 12% of our GDP. And yet, roughly 1/3 of our people are dependent on agriculture. So it's a very, very narrow slice of the bibingka with so many people dependent on it. And what's the secret to agriculture? How do we invigorate agriculture? Well, I'll talk about it a little bit in the how portion. But basically, we're going to grow the economy focusing on these 3 areas. We're going to develop new sources of economic activity. We're going to invigorate the low-growth sources, such as agriculture. What was once a low growth, we can invigorate it by the following means. And what's important is, how are we going to do it? There are 5 elements that are very clear in my mind. First, we have to continue investing in our human capital. The way we're going to do this is after having invested in the physical gaps and shortages, the classrooms, the teachers, and so on and so forth, we now need to move up the value chain. We now need to improve the quality of our education. That will require teacher training. That will require more scholarships for teachers so that they can get their masterals. That will require an entire sector, our education sector, to learn new ways of teaching old lessons. And one of the most important elements here is internet penetration. There's a World Bank study that says, 2009, again revalidated 2012, that says for every 10% internet penetration in a low to middle level country, that's us, it will improve GDP growth by about 1.3, 1.4%. No? Simply providing access. Internet access today is the same as what a road access was in the past. The road is what connected that far-off community to the rest of the country and the rest of the world, and now that is what internet connectivity will do. So we will invest. The government will invest if necessary. We will build out the areas where connectivity must be put in place so that every school all across the country, all of the school sites all across the country will now be connected with internet to enable all of these communities and all of these children to be part of the world as we know it today. So investing in human capital, improving the quality for education is very important. One of the key programs that we're going to do is we're going to give a scholarship. Ramon, you might be very happy to hear this. We're going to give a scholarship of 100,000 pesos to all the valedictorians of all the high schools all across the country. There's about 5,000. There's about 5,200 senior high schools. Each one's going to have a valedictorian. These are the best and brightest by definition of the principals, right? And the school system in those places. So all of these valedictorians will get a scholarship of up to, it's not cash grant, of up to 100,000 pesos. In other words, if they can get to LaSalle or Ateneo, UP, or any of the other schools, in other words, their poverty will not be a limit to the kind and quality of education that they can get. So that's what we're going to do. It's quite simple, you know, 5,000 valedictorians at 100,000 pesos is roughly 600 million pesos a year times 4 years that you're going to give them this 100,000 pesos. So long as they can stay in the school, is no more than 2.4 billion pesos. No? Here we are talking of no more than 2.4 billion pesos, as if kayang-kaya. Remember, not so long ago when 1 billion pesos was so difficult for us because there was no fiscal space. But that's what we're going to do for our kids. We're going to make sure that none of them are limited. If they're the best and the brightest Filipinos that we can produce today, they will not be limited in what they can attain. But that's not all. The top 10%, not top 10 in number, but the top 10% of that graduating class, there are roughly 1.1 million seniors in high school that are going to graduate. So the top 10% is roughly 100,000 kids. These 100,000 are also going to get a stipend similar to what GATSPE now provides, about 10,000 pesos each, so that they can then go to the best college that they can get into, so that, again, their poverty will not be a limit to what education that they can get and what future they can build for themselves. So this, in general, is what we're going to do in continuing to invest in our people. The kids themselves, so that they have access, the teachers themselves, so that they can teach better, those who are in school, and then the infrastructure, physical infrastructure, such as the internet, so that they can be much better attuned and connected with the rest of the world. Next area, energy. When we talk about energy, most often the first thing out of people's mouths are second most expensive in Asia after Japan. That's true too. But that does not tell the whole story of energy. There is a huge potential in energy as we move and transition our country from relatively dirty energy to relatively cleaner energy. Right now, roughly, half our energy mix is dirty. That's oil, and that is coal. Okay? About 50% is dirty. The other 50%, geothermal, hydro, renewable energy, is the other 50%. Historically, and again, it's important to see this in context. No? Historically, the most important parameter was cost, and the cheapest was coal at about 380 per kilowatt hour. No? Every other technology was more expensive. But now, because of the Paris Accords, I intend to be able to avail of the Paris concessions so that, in fact, these rich countries who dirtied up their air to begin with are then held to their promises of providing support for countries such as us who want to move away from dirty energy such as coal and move towards renewable. More LNG, more hydro, more geo, and more of the renewable energies. That will create jobs, that will create opportunities, and that will create a better climate for all of us into the future. For Manileños who are here, a more parochial note. Roughly, there are 5,300 city buses that ply Metro Manila's routes every day. All of them are diesel. One of the first acts that I will do is to mandate that in a certain period of time, within 1, 2, no more than 3 years, all of them convert to CNG so that we can have cleaner transportation for our city here in Metro Manila. Just a note, no? I think it's important that we realize there can be no one-size-fits-all solution. Metro Manila, because it's urban, it's very, very dense, has relatively dirtier air than outside Metro Manila. CNG as a bus, both for CAPEX, is more expensive than regular. So I think what we need to do is we need to transition properly the sequencing of moving to cleaner transport as we go along. Because why burden somebody who lives in Romblon with a mandated CNG bus when there is really right now no dirty air pollution problem in Romblon? That's all I just want to say. So that's why we're doing this phase by phase in the highly urbanized cities, and then before we can look at moving off to the countryside. So that's what we're going to do here in Metro Manila. Speaking of Metro Manila, again, these buses, 5,300 buses more or less in NCR, all have different franchises, all have different owners, all have different compensation systems, and that contributes to a large part of the traffic that we have in NCR. No? So one of the things that we're going to do is I'm going to go to Congress. I believe that this cannot be done by executive fiat alone. We go to Congress and we get a law, and I believe that I can do this in short order of time, that says all of these franchises will be truncated so that, in fact, we can bid out one bus carrier per route so that the buses themselves are not competing with each other and in their competition taking up lanes one after the other and racing down the highways for the next rider. Likewise, compensation of the drivers. The drivers now are paid by passenger, and that's why they have to race to get the passenger. I mean, I don't mean to pat the economists on the back, but really everything's incentive system. That's what the economists say, right? However, how you incentivize people is how they're going to behave. So if the driver is going to get paid a fixed wage, irrespective of how many passengers he has, then he will stay in line, right? And not take up lanes and not cause traffic as he goes and tries to earn a living for himself. So that's what we're going to do with energy, and that's what we're going to do for the traffic here in Metro Manila. Let me just tell you a story. It's very, very simple. I was in Benguet sometime a week or two ago, and we came across sayote farmer. Sayote farmer said, "How much do you get for your sayote?" 3 to 4 pesos a kilo. That same sayote becomes 6 pesos a kilo in La Trinidad, Benguet. That's the trading post there. It becomes 12 pesos a kilo when you go to Baguio Central Market. That's at the end of Session Road. And that becomes 50 pesos a kilo when it gets here to Balintawak and to Manila. Right? All of us, all urbanites, pay 50 pesos per kilo for that sayote. That farmer earns 4 pesos per kilo for that sayote. That's why our farmers are poor. Because the 46 peso differential is not made by them. Right? So how do we make our farmers go from subsistence, hand-to-mouth existence, to a situation where they are self-sustaining, where they have real incomes, that they can put away money and plan for their future. Simple. We need to increase their incomes. But that's not the story. The story is how. We cannot do this by subsidies, because subsidies will create a whole different set of problems. The way to do this is to enable them to aggregate their supply and their demand into scale. Because as we all know in the world today, without scale, you cannot be competitive. It is scale economies. It's what gives you negotiating power. It's what gives you the power to say no to low prices. It's what gives you the power to negotiate for capital so that you can invest in your farms, you can invest in your post-harvest facilities, you can invest in your warehouses, in your chillers, in the trucking, and so on and so forth, so that, in fact, you can earn a real living putting food in all of our plates here in the urban centers. That's what we're going to do for our agriculture sector. Imagine 30 million Filipinos in our countryside who presently may be in subsistence hand-to-mouth. If all of them, or a large portion of them, get some help so that they can, in fact, be productive, income-generating members of our economy, imagine the boom in our countryside, which will create the demand, which will create further economic activity, and that will add another 1.5 percentage points to our GDP as we move to growing our economy into the future. That's what we're going to do for our countryside. I got about 2-3 pages, Ramon. Is that okay? Then we have about 20 minutes for Q&A. Right? Other blockages, infrastructure. You're all very familiar with the blockages of infrastructure. We need to invest more. There's no substitute for it. The demand for infrastructure is directly related to the growth in our economy. I remember when I was DTI, Greg, when we were working on the car manufacturing plant, 60,000 units a year, vehicle sales was a good year for the car industry. This year it's 300,000 units. Streets aren't getting any wider, so especially in urban areas, so the only way to build capacity is to build second level, third level. So that's what we're going to do. Are you disappointed? Yes, there is some disappointed. But I just want to say, many of the solutions are already in place or already being worked on. No? The NLEX, SLEX connectors are being built, and that will add another 10 plus 4, 14 lanes, north-south, radial, all across NCR. Parts of that will be done by the end of this year and will be fully completed by the end of next year. So that's in the works already. Other things that are important is building a new airport. No? I know that many of you like the convenience of having NAIA right in our backyard here, but here's the thing. Take Charles de Gaulle, take Cheplakok, take Narita. There has to be movement out of the city. Remember that the first airport, all of you are too young to remember this, and I only know this because Jaime told me this story from the history books. Right? The first runway was Ayala Avenue, diba? So we moved the airport from inner city to outer city, Parañaque. Now we have to move it again. We are growing. We are 100 million people. We are a country that's being looked upon as a bright star in Asia. So we need to step up as well. No? What's the difference? NAIA, 440 hectares. Only intersecting runways. 0624, that's the long runway, and then the one heading to Baclara is called 1331. No? So, if you're using this, you cannot use this, and if you're using this, you cannot use this. Parang it's fairly straightforward. So, there is a limitation to what NAIA can produce. Can we do this immediately? No. But one of the first things that we're going to do is I'm going to start the rail, high-speed rail, not a commuter line, but a high-speed rail. Similar to the train that gets you from Cheplakok to Sinling, I think is the first stop, and then to Kowloon, and then to Hong Kong Island. High-speed rail, we need to do that because there's no new airport, there's no new location without having that high-speed rail system. Simultaneous to that would be an elevated highway so that, again, we can get that 90 kilometers more or less, 90 kilometers from Central Business District, NCR, to Clark as fast as possible. You can get there. Our target is 35 minutes, similar to what it is in Hong Kong. And let me just, and I don't know if the clapping is just for my family or not, but while we're at it, right? Why Clark? Why Clark? Clark is 2,000 hectares. NAIA is 440 hectares. It's not much rocket science to figure out. In Clark, we can have 3 parallel runways, whereas in NAIA, we are limited by the very configuration that already exists in NAIA. Number 2, and here's the best part of it, for those of you who haven't figured it out, 440 hectares, 4.4 million square meters. Pick a number, 100,000 pesos per square meter. The last bidding for the marketplace here in of SLEX food terminal was at multiple of 100,000. Okay, right. So the point I'm trying to make is 100,000 pesos per square meter, roughly $2,000 per square meter, 4 million square meters, $8 billion. It pays for the entire move. It pays for the entire growth and development. But if elected president, I'm not going to spend it all. I'm not. No? I've thought a lot about this. That 440 hectares, which is in Central Business District, should not be made available to the market all in one blow because it'll depress prices, right? So what I intend to do is go to Congress and say every president gets to only sell a portion of that 440 for major undertakings of our country, so that in fact, this is our nest egg for growing our country, growing our economy from where it is today to long pants. And that's what we intend to do with this asset of what it is in the Central Business District. Last item, last sort of blockage that will unleash the energies of the private sector and of our economy. No? Judicial system. Not much is talked about the judicial system, no? But let me say 2 things. Let me tell you 2 facts. The first is this. The last study that I read calculated that roughly 2 or 3 trillion pesos worth of assets are locked up in litigation. They cannot be transacted. They cannot be apothecated. They cannot be, nothing can be done with them because it's locked up in litigation. Now, maybe one party or another likes it to be in litigation, right? But imagine this potential in our economy that's not being used, that's not being deployed. So there is a great deal of blockage, there's a great deal of potential in unlocking these assets that are tied up in litigation. And that relates to the next point. The next point is this. No? The next president, and maybe this is the most one of the most important reasons as to why we should be very careful in our choices. No? The next president gets to appoint 10 Supreme Court justices. Right? The wrong choice might mean that black becomes white and white becomes black, or red becomes blue or blue becomes red, because they can interpret. 10 Supreme Court justices. And that's why we need to be very, very careful. It will change the entire character of our judicial system. It will therefore change the entire character of the rules and regulations under which we live as a society and under which we build our businesses as an economy. So I think that that's one of the areas that we need to pay attention to. We've started to do that by having continuous trial. That's one of our goals. No? Just the other day, over Holy Week, I saw, I didn't finish it because as always, I fall asleep, but I saw a movie where in a matter of, it was like a documentary movie, in a matter of a few weeks or months, they were able to finish the entire litigation. The point is, don't hire a lawyer if he cannot appear in the hearings. Because for the poor in particular, justice delayed is really justice denied. They don't have the money to keep paying the lawyer to show up. They don't have the resources to keep after a long, protracted legal process. So continuous trials is going to be one of our goals. We've started that. It's called, we patterned it after the eco zone system. We call it the justice eco zone. So what we've done is we've completed all the necessary elements. The public attorney's office, the prosecutor, the judges, the clerks, so on and so forth, including e-warrant, e-subpoena, so that in fact, in that area, it's now being tried in Quezon City. No? I'm going to do that for the rest of the country. We started that when I was DILG together with Secretary Laila de Lima and Chief Justice Sereno, where we said, let's have an area where everything works, where justice is actually fast, effective, efficient, so people can actually get justice. And so let's complete all of the elements so that justice can be obtained. And that's what we've done in Quezon City, and that's what we're going to do for the rest of the country. That way you can have justice, meaningful justice, all across our country. What can you expect in the manner in which we will govern? These are some of the things that we will do, how we're going to do it. I think it's very important that we go back to our long relationship. You know me. We've had long relationship, many interactions, many engagements. We have not agreed all the time. There have been instances where my own decision may have run counter to the particular bottom line of one of your members. For example, as a senator, I investigated the pre-need scam. I still maintain that it's a scam. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their savings, buying into the notion that if we put our money there, by the time tuition time comes for our kids, but what happened? The money evaporated. Cheaper medicines law. I saw in the other countries that there was, because of competition or government intervention, prices of medicines were cheaper. So I advocated that as a senator. Maybe one or two of your members may not have been so happy. Passenger Bill of Rights, where what all of you, when you travel, come to expect as ordinary course of business, that if your flight is delayed or if you're bumped off, you would be compensated. Why is that available to you as you travel abroad, but not available to you as you travel within the country? I bring these examples up simply to say that we have had disagreements. But let me say, and I think that you know this in your hearts, it was never personal for me, and certainly not personal against you. It was always what was for the common good. It was always what I thought was right. And that's what you can expect from Mar Roxas. I believe government is an enabler. Government is your ally to help you grow, to help you be productive and successful, because your success is our economy's success, is our people's success. Jobs, incomes, livelihoods is the point of all of this, so that people can live with honor, with dignity. They have a job, they have certainty, they can plan. Things that perhaps all of us here take for granted are not givens for 90% of our people, if not more. And that's what we want to do. We want to be able to build a society so that, in fact, it's not just the economy, it's not just the business sector, but our entire people, our entire society is able to grow, to develop, and to build good, productive, meaningful lives for themselves. I invite all of you to join me in that task, to join me in that journey, so as we go from short pants to long pants, as we move our country to modernity, to maturity, and to greater opportunity for all. Maraming salamat at magandang tanghali sa inyong lahat.
I'll shoot the first question, Secretary Mar. Okay. I've got about 30 questions here, and you practically answered all of them. Here's one question. What is your view, and if you become president, would you support the country joining the TPP program, the Trans-Pacific Partnership? Can you give us finally an answer?
No, I've given you an answer before, no? But here's the thing, here's the political reality. For any of you who have been following CNN, BBC, TPP is dead. There is no single American presidential candidate that is backing TPP today. So I think that we should put this in the context of the realities. Without the United States as a market, there is no TPP, right? So I think that the way the dynamics are going in the US today, the chances for a TPP are slim to none. However, having said that, assuming that it was viable, assuming that it was going on, what do I think about international trade agreements? I think that's the real question. I think international trade agreements are good because it broadens our markets. It gives us access. However, they must be fair. They must give us the same opportunity to access their market as they have an opportunity to access ours. What's the sticking point in all trade agreements? Agriculture. Because other countries subsidize their agriculture, have export subsidy, they buy product from their farmers to enable them to stay alive. We are not prosperous enough to do that. So what happens when Archer Daniel Midlands, what happens when all of these industrialized, mechanized, huge American conglomerates come in and dump their product here? Whether it's rice, corn, vegetables, and so on and so forth, right? So I am very careful. I would be very careful. I've negotiated for the country, the JPEPA, Excellency. I was the trade negotiator for JPEPA. I was the senator who defended it on the Senate floor as a trade agreement. I think that trade agreement worked for us. We had access to the Japanese market. The Japanese market had access to us. There was an agreement that rice, which was sacred to the Japanese, would not be one of the items that we would trade among our two countries, and so on and so forth, right? The point I'm trying to make is, for TPP, as it stands right now, no, I would not be in favor of it because it will kill our agriculture sector. Is this hard and into the future? No, the question is, what are the terms of engagement? Look at the members of TPP. Singapore, no agriculture sector to protect. Brunei, no agriculture sector to protect. Remember, 30%, 33% of our people are dependent on agriculture. That's 30 million people. Yeah, Vietnam has 65 million people, and I think that this is a good discussion. Vietnam is a member, has subscribed to the TPP. What's the difference between Vietnam and us? Vietnam, one unitary landed country with Mekong River Delta as its irrigation field. Philippines, archipelago. We have to build our irrigation. So their rice is infinitely cheaper to produce than our rice. So I think that what we need to do is, we don't look at these things as ends in themselves. Trade agreements for our country should be access to markets, should be opportunities. If we do not find opportunity, if we do not find access, why go to it and just have the negatives? Because they intend to sell to us. Huh? They intend, to be part of a trade agreement, TPP, the other countries intend to sell to us. We must be very clear what we intend to sell to them, and is it viable? Because if not, lugi tayo. So for TPP, not only do I give you the answer, I give you the thinking behind it so that you understand where I would go and how I would act given the opportunity to be your president.
Secretary Roxas, like Perry, I've got lots of questions here.
We've known each other too long, and Perry.
But I'll try and cover some of the questions that, obviously there's many things and you've addressed many issues, but there are a couple that are still on the side here. This is one question. 25 years after the local government code was enacted into law, many have argued that the decentralization experiment has failed. Others completely agree with it. The Roxas Robredo platform of government states that national development is only possible through local empowerment. You've also said that the government is good at some things and that the private sector should be allowed to do the rest. How do you stand on the devolution of power, local government code, and empowering LGUs? Are you supportive of it or less supportive of it?
I am supportive of empowering our LGUs. But I think that this power, as in all powers, must be limited and circumscribed. There is no unlimited power. Even the Constitution limits powers of the presidency. No? There are 1,490 municipalities in our country. If they do well, because powers and resources are devolved to them, then that is the prosperity in the countryside that we so need and want. Now, what are some of the problems? Let me go straight to the point. The problem is differing regulation between local and national. Diba? So that you might, for example, be a bus company, you have a national franchise from LTFRB, but when you pass through a certain locality, they'll ask you or they'll tax you another amount because you're passing through their locality. So, it's a very simple solution. I would go to Congress, I understand this quite well, I would go to Congress and put under ecozone status major government projects and contracts. Cell sites, for example, dams, power plants, major irrigation facilities, so that all of these major infrastructure are not at the mercy of a local whimsical warlord. No? That's the real problem. Diba? You had a problem in Pagbilao, for example, in Quezon. They were going to foreclose on the power plant, thinking only they have not paid the real property taxes. They're thinking local, but the impact of their action was national. It would have brought down the entire Luzon grid, right? Had that been put through a ecozone status, as I'm proposing, then they would be subject only to one set of rules, and there would be no more potential for harassment for any of these major projects. So that's what I would do.
Here's one from the floor. Your campaign is anchored on the continuity of Daang Matuwid. Does this also mean that you will retain a good number of cabinet secretaries and key officials in the Aquino administration? Who will be your key appointees?
I expect a clean slate. Every president gets a clean slate. I expect a clean slate as we begin in 2016.
Do you have any persons in mind, Secretary Mar?
You know, I've been through this a number of times when I served in cabinet in the past. No, I think it's unfair to those people who will be named, because then they'll be scrutinized and they'll be perhaps pilloried and demonized, perhaps, and so on and so forth. So, I think first things first. Let's win first, and then let's discuss the cabinet.
Here is another question from the floor, Secretary. One of the things we must do is strengthen our resilience to disasters and the negative effects of climate change. Let's say, for instance, the Angat Dam collapses due to a large earthquake, and that Metro Manila remains, of course, an important component of our national economy. Do you have some thoughts on mitigating economic disasters and how we should prepare ourselves?
Well, I think one of the most important projects that the government undertook, and I intend to continue this and expand further, is the investment in forecasting technology. I don't know if you remember the days when if Pag-asa said rain, you all knew you could go to the beach, right? And if they said sunny, you better bring an umbrella, right? Those were the old days. I mean, we all laugh because we all went through that experience, right? Okay, I mean, no class tomorrow, yay! And then we're all out playing because it's a sunny day, right? Okay, we all remember that. Now, here's the thing. We invested in forecasting technology billions of pesos, so that what you've seen over the last several years, it started out 24-hour notice, it's become 48-hour notice, it's now 72-hour notice. We can now actually forecast better where these storms, you know, earthquake, nobody can predict an earthquake, right? But storms, you can actually go and predict. We have about 25 storms, tropical depressions that enter our area of responsibility every year. You can now actually predict it. You can inform all the people, get them out. I mean, you know, Yolanda was a great tragedy, but remember, this was the biggest storm ever to hit land in human history. You know? We lost nearly 7,000 people. I mean, that's 1.5 million families were displaced. You know? I mean, it's a huge tragedy. But we learned from that. You know? Subsequently, we invested further. We were able to now forcibly evacuate people from the coastal areas whenever there was a warning of the storm. And that's why the casualty counts of subsequent storms have diminished substantially. Now, so when it comes to storms, which is what hits us most regularly, forecasting, resiliency, building capacity of the LGUs to themselves be able to respond to these calamities. For example, very, very simple. Have a genset for every municipio, for every rural health unit, for every hospital that's along the Pacific coast of our country. No? That will require investment, but that's something that we sorely need. And for, you know, the countries on the western side don't go through what comes in from the Pacific. So iba naman ang pangangailangan dito sa western side. So the point I'm trying to make is definitely we need to build greater resiliency. We've come very far. We need to build greater resiliency. But the most fundamental element here is the information. So we've invested in that already. We need to build better models, weather pattern models. If we need to buy or get access by time to this Cray supercomputer so that our weather pattern models are the best that we can, so that we can, in fact, inform our people. I'll just give you a tidbit. No? This is an interesting tidbit. In the United States, their weather bureau is, guess who it reports to? Department of Agriculture. Historically, in the US, their government, their people invested in the weather bureau so that they could tell the farmers when to plant, when to harvest, when to expect a cold front, and so on and so forth, right? Okay. The point lang I'm trying to make is, it's not investing for the sake of investing. It's investing so that we can save our people from the calamity, so that we can build resiliency in our communities, so that we can rise up after these calamities hit, much after. And that's why we need to invest more in these technologies.
You've been traveling around the country, Secretary, and I've had a chance to see it at close range in many ways, although you've had a history, obviously, with the DILG and various other posts. As you reflect on the country at this stage, has anything struck you on your trips, on your visits? You're seeing the Philippines up close at this time of the year. Maybe as a parting a set of remarks as we close this forum, maybe just some thoughts on how you see the country, what's inspired you, how have you seen it as you've seen it up close across outside Manila?
That's a great question, because really, wherever you go, and I hope that you continue to travel around our country and not just stay at the resorts, but go out and talk to common people, real people, as I know that you do, Jaime. We're a great people. People work hard. They sacrifice. They do without so that they can give to their children all that they can, Even in the midst of calamity, Yolanda, we were walking around there in a hovel, really tarpaulin cover. Sec Volts and I, we were walking around inspecting, trying to figure out how to clear the streets, etc. People will smile at you and offer you a hot cup of coffee because they're steaming coffee by a small fire that they're doing. We're a generous people. And our people deserve so much more than what they're getting. And that's what this journey is all about. It's giving them what is their due. A due that many of us here already enjoy, perhaps even take for granted. But for them, is still quite unreachable. All the way north from Abulog, all the way south to Tawi-Tawi, People work hard, fishermen. They do what they can to earn a living. And they're quite innovative in how they save their money and manage their resources, meager as it is, to try to make it through the day and to set something aside for the future. And their hopes and dreams, when they talk to me, is not very different from your hopes and dreams. Maybe just differentiated by the number of zeros, you know. But really, I mean, and I think that you, part of the governing elite, the businessmen, the educated, those who have made it, we owe them, we owe our people what we can. Not because it's a handout, not because of paawa, but simply in recognition of what they do, the hard work that they do. Unfortunately, their hard work is not compensated properly because of just the system that's in place. And those are some of the blockages that we need to remove so that they can unleash their own potentials and receive the just wage, compensation, income that they so richly deserve. No? And we're a great nation, and we can do so much better. Maraming salamat. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Maroa seemingly quite at home as he faces members of the Makati Business Club and the Management Association of the Philippines. He said that this was some sort of a homecoming.